On the issue of abortion, for example, in 2002, she upheld the Bush administration's global gag rule. That's the policy of withholding funds for international groups that offer family planning information and services, including abortion. On the issue of discrimination, she has frequently ruled against plaintiffs. For example, ruling in 2004 against African-American corrections officers who said they were retaliated against for filing discrimination complaints. On claims against big business, Sotomayor is herself a former corporate lawyer. In the year 2000, she wrote The Dissent in a 2-to-1 decision that ultimately favored victims' families. This was concerning the 1996 crash of TWA Flight 800 off of Long Island. Sotomayor wrote that the crash had not occurred within U.S. territorial waters and that therefore victims' families should not have had the right to sue the airline for extra damages. Again, now she was the dissenting view in this case. And she wrote that the judges who disagreed with her were ignoring legislative history and earlier case law, saying that their decision was, quote, clearly a legislative policy choice, which should not be made by the courts. Does this sound like the record of an unabashedly liberal activist judge to you? Joining us now is Dahlia Lithwick, senior editor for Slate.com. Dahlia, thank you very much for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm the only person in America who's pointing out that Judge Sotomayor is not all that liberal. At least it feels that way. People who are looking into the actual case law here and her record, does her actual record bear any relation to the names that she's being called in the political arena today?
No, and I think you made a really good point before, which is this is the pileup, Rachel, of the identity politics piece with her actual record, which no one wants to look at. It's just become very easy on the political right to say, oh, Obama picked a great story over someone with an impressive judicial record, rather than saying, actually, he managed to do both. We should credit him with that. So I think you're quite right. They're going after her on the empathy thing and on the great life story thing. Funny, Clarence Thomas's great life story counted as a plus for him, but for Sotomayor, it somehow suggests she's unhinged.
Well, what is your assessment specifically of that empathy criticism? I mean, conservatives are saying that Obama's looking for a justice, and in Sotomayor he has found a justice who will substitute her feelings for the law. And I have to wonder if that's just kind of obvious, you know, anti-woman politics, or if that's crazy Supreme Court partisan politics jargon that has a totally different meaning than we would understand those words to mean in the real world.
Well, two things, Rachel. The first is so much of this is anti-woman politics. I mean, so much of this is larded up with talk of her being a bully and aggressive, the kinds of things that she does on the bench that Scalia can get away with, but she can't. But I think your second point is really key, which really is that this is kind of empathy being massively distorted by the right to mean bias. When Obama talked about empathy and the audacity of hope, he was very, very clear. He didn't want judges to make stuff up so that the poor guy wins. What he said is put yourself in the other person's shoes, right? That was his mom's credo. When he talks about empathy, I think all he's saying is just listen. Listen to what the other side is saying. See if there's merit to their argument, and then think it through. It's a process question for him, empathy. It's not results-oriented, and I think that's been massively upended to mean, and what you're hearing today is, oh, she's results-oriented. All she cares is giving the little guy a fair shake. She loathes white men. That's not what Obama meant when he talked about empathy. It's certainly not something that's reflected anywhere in the hundreds of cases, if you look at her record, that this is a person who upends the rule of law to give the little guy an extra leg up.
On balance, on the question of whether or not she will move the court in either direction, when you look at her record, Dahlia, do you think that she will be sort of where Souter is? Do you think she'll be to the left? Do you think she'll be to the right of Souter?
I think she's pretty much Souter. I think that if you look at her record, and I've spent the day doing it, she's pretty text-based. She looks at the statutes. She looks at the precedent. She's kind of really a very moderate liberal. Now, on the Second Circuit, she's on the liberal half. On the Supreme Court, she'll also be on the liberal half. But the notion that she's some kind of Scalia in a dress just could not be further off. I mean, she is not the liberals' answer to Scalia or John Roberts. She is very, very much a moderate, temperate, minimalist, careful liberal.
Which, of course, leaves open the question of whether liberals will ever get their John Roberts or Antonin Scalia, but that, I guess, will be settled by the next nominee. Dahlia Lithwick, senior editor at Slate.com. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Justice Sotomayor would replace admittedly liberal Justice Souter. If she is confirmed, do you think the court would significantly move one way in either direction?
I think she's probably going to wind up in the mold of a Souter, despite some of the things that you said. I've looked at some of her rulings, and remember, the fact is the New York court is not conservative the way Alito is on the court, on the Supreme Court, or Roberts or Thomas. They are very, very conservative. I think if you look at her rulings, they don't go there. They're pretty much common sense. They do have that human touch to them. I've read a number of them. And I just don't think you can really predict everything with certainty. Look at Souter. He was considered a Republican conservative. So I just think if you look at her life story, which we did today, and if you look at some of her rulings and some of the things she said, I have a good feeling about her, you know, but no one can predict with certainty.
On the issue of her life experience, the politics around that are emerging to be sort of complicated and interesting. On the one hand, she is the American dream.
Yes.
In so many ways. On the other hand, we're seeing conservative groups, not so much Republican senators yet, but really conservative interest groups, attack the story of her life story being used as an asset in the nomination process, saying that it implies that she's going to bring her own feelings, her own experiences to bear more than the law. What's your reaction to that?
Well, my reaction is that that's ridiculous. We all see life through our own lens. You see it through your life. I see it through mine. You know that.
Yeah.
And why would it be any different on the court? And that's why I think that our president said very clearly what was important to him was not only experience, and by the way, she brings more federal judicial experience than anyone in the last 100 years who's been nominated, so she's very experienced. But the fact is, her life story will influence her. She's going to have a certain feeling when she has a case that deals with disability, because she has a disability. It's just the way it is. Is it better? Is it worse? I think it's important to have diversity on the court. That's why Olympia Snowe and I, Olympia's Republican, myself a Democrat, asked the president to appoint a woman, because you do see life through that different lens. Not better, not worse, but important when you're sitting around a table. And, for example, the Supreme Court had a case that dealt with strip search on a 13-year-old girl. And it was said by, I think it was Ruth Bader Ginsburg, how important it was that there be a woman there to explain to the men what that really means to a woman. So not better, not worse, important distinction, different lens.
Speaking of different lenses, of course, the historic import of this nomination is that this, if she were confirmed, she'd be the first Hispanic, the first Latino or Latina to be appointed to the bench. Representing California with such a large Latino population, what do you think this means for, what do you think it means for race relations? What do you think it means for political power in the Hispanic community?
I will tell you tonight they are celebrating so much in the Hispanic community. In my state and all over the country. It is such a recognition that in America our diversity is our strength. It's a recognition that yes, a woman, yes, a Hispanic can make it to the court based on qualifications, based on experience. It's terrific, and it's terrific for the young people. It's terrific for all Americans to understand that. Think about this woman's life story. Her dad, I believe that after the 3rd grade, he had no more education. And the mom just working her fingers to the bone to give both her kids a chance. It really sends this country into soaring heights, I think, when those things. I felt that way about our president. And it is very important, I think, to all the children of America to understand that if they work hard, yes, they can fulfill their dreams.
Let me ask you about the overall premise again with which I sort of introduced this discussion, and that is the idea that the court does lean right now. And you've described Sotomayor as somebody who may be hard to predict, like a lot of justices are hard to predict in terms of how they'll rule. Do you think it's appropriate, it would have been appropriate for this nomination, it will be appropriate for further nominations, to pick somebody who is predictable, for President Obama to choose somebody who will be reliably a liberal on a court that has a lot of people who are unabashed conservatives?
Well, I actually said I thought she would be in the mold of a David Souter. I believe that she will be, from what I know about her, what I know about her life, what I know about her work, what I see about the decisions I've looked at so far. You can see the compassion. You can see the understanding that when the court does make a decision, it impacts our lives. So I feel good about it. But you can't predict anybody, Rachel. Even if you take someone who's a total liberal or total conservative, you don't know. As I said, when Souter went on, he was considered to be an absolute conservative. Yeah. So I can't sit here tonight and promise you anything except my own judgment is that she will bring all the good qualities that we want in a justice to the High Court, and that she will have a good impact, and I believe at the end of the day will move us in a direction that is more progressive and more inclusive for the people of this great country.